Hello everyone, I'm JG. Welcome back to Music Forever, where today I'm reviewing Mastodon's album, The Hunter. Now before I really get into this review, I just want to say throughout this entire month of March I'm doing something called Mastodon Madness, where I review all of Mastodon's albums leading up to the release of their new album, Emperor of Sand, at the end of the month. So I've already reviewed all of Mastodon's albums that have come out before The Hunter. You can check those out already. I'll have a playlist linked at the end of the video. And I'm going to have the reviews coming out for all the other albums that haven't been released, yet as of when The Hunter was released. Coming soon, sometime before the Emperor of Sand is released. And then I'm reviewing that album, of course. So yeah, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on that content. As for The Hunter itself, this is definitely possibly the weirdest album in Mastodon's entire, collection of whatever they've released. And by what I mean by that is it does continue Mastodon's change of sound from a more aggressive sludge metal leaning group to a more, progressive metal, alternative, traditional kind of heavy metal mix, if that's even the way to describe them. And, as I've said before in the previous Mastodon reviews, throughout all their albums really since their first one, they have gotten less heavy with time. Of course, this album is the least heavy album that they've released up to this point. However, when compared to Crack the Sky or even Blood Mountain that preceded it in terms of, heaviness, this album is a bit different in the regard that it's not as, unlike Blood Mountain, there aren't as many moments of aggression, and unlike Crack the Sky, it's nowhere near as, progressive or epic of an album. It goes for a sound that many would consider radio-friendly, though I don't mean that necessarily in a bad way. I know many people usually do use that in a negative meaning, but I really don't think it's that bad on its own. But considering how Mastodon were more, sludge metal, like very heavy kind of genre of music, and progressive metal, a style that's typically not, radio-friendly in any regard. In fact, many may argue that it's quite the opposite of that. This is kind of a very different direction for Mastodon to be taking with their work. As a result of this album's differences, it's kind of been a, album that many fans are divided over. Some fans like it, some fans don't, some think it's just different, and, as per usual when bands change their sound, there's going to be controversy surrounding it, and Mastodon is really no exception. If you've ever seen a fan base react to a band change their sound before, it's not much different here. But personally, I enjoyed this kind of change in sound. That's not to say I didn't like the sound of their earlier records. Believe me, check out the reviews for those records. It's clear that I do like that sound. In fact, this is my least favorite Mastodon album, but I still do enjoy it. And, really part of that is that the songs, despite being more, radio-friendly, I guess you would say, and less heavy, less sludgy, I still think they're well, composed. Unlike Mastodon's previous releases, this album doesn't follow a concept. It's not a concept album in any way. It's not related to any of the elements like the previous 4 albums were. It doesn't have a story going in it like Leviathan or Blood Mountain or Crack the Sky. It's just kind of a collection of songs, which is definitely a new thing, definitely something that could, maybe scare people away that were a fan of those things on previous albums, but, I don't really think it's that bad of a thing if it's done right. And is it done right on this album? Well, kind of, in my opinion. That might be the weakest point of this album, is kind of, the cohesion of it. The tracks, they don't have a concept, as I said before, going from one to another, so each track just kind of feels like its own little world, its own little bubble, with not much connection to the other tracks around it. You can go from one song about one topic to a song about something completely different, and you have some tracks that are more aggressive leaning going into tracks that are, more radio leaning, less aggressive, less heavy, and, it doesn't flow quite as well as all of other Mastodon releases. That's not to say it's like, one of those albums that just jumps from one jarring change to another, and it just feels like it was all slapped together. This album definitely had, care put into the ordering of the tracks, and it's not like an uncomfortable listen where, the transitions are just bad overall, but I think compared to Mastodon's other works that, have already been released and have been released so far after this album, I think this is the least cohesive out of all of them, which definitely makes it stand out for that reason, in my opinion. And going back to that metaphor I said earlier about how each song is kind of its own little world, its own little bubble, that kind of goes a bit further because all the songs on this album are pretty different from each other in terms of lyrical content, in terms of what they do with the instrumentation and the vocals. Of course, Mastodon has always been a band to play around with vocals. As I've said before on my previous reviews, they have, have times where they've been aggressive with their vocals, with more growling. There have been times where they have clean vocals, and of course the band itself has 3 lead vocalists, so there's a lot of diversity in the vocal department of this album. Not to mention that they have a guest feature from Scott Kelly of Neurosis, once again, who's appeared on every album since Leviathan. He appears on the track Spectralite here, and does a good job as always. The track that leads off this project, Black Tongue, is one of the more aggressive leading songs. The vocals are more rough, not quite as heavy as anything you would hear on Leviathan or Remission, but, still in the rougher vein of things. And the instrumental is also, a bit more aggressive. It's definitely an aggressive way to start off this album, maybe a good way to ease people into the change of sound that they would hear on this project. And you could instantly hear that change when you hear the next track, Curl of the Burl, which was a big single for this project. I mean, the first track was as well, but this one in particular, I feel like this track just has, a bit more of a radio-friendly feel to it. Definitely something I could hear being played on rock radio, and I don't mean that in a bad way. If this was on rock radio, I feel like it'd be something better on there. And it's a catchy song, Curl of the Burl, and lyrically, it is a bit weird as well. Like, look up the story behind the song, and it's kind of, weird. I don't want to go into too much detail for all these tracks, but yeah, it's overall a catchy song. You have all the vocalists doing their thing here, and you really don't have any of the aggressive, rough vocals. The second track here on this album, Curl of the Burl, is definitely where you start to hear some of those, radio-friendly influences on this project. This song feels like it could be a massive single, and to a degree it was for the band. And you can kind of hear that in the fact that it's a very catchy song. The hook is definitely something that will get stuck in your head. You have all the vocalists doing their thing here, and the, meaning behind the song is definitely weird. I recommend you look that up. I'm not going to go into tons of detail for all these songs' lyrical meanings because they don't really combine into one big story. Just kind of, as I said before, bubble, bubble, no connection. But then the third track on this project kind of goes back to the more aggressive sound with Blasteroid, and now this song is definitely a short song, really punk inspired in my opinion, and especially in the hook of the song. The verses are, have the more clean vocals going on, but then the hook comes in and the vocals are just kind of, screaming, not necessarily in a growling kind of way like the earlier, just, more of a punk scream in my opinion. And it really kind of stands out for that reason. Definitely an aggressive high point on this album. Now the next track, Stargasm, in my opinion could fit onto Crack the Sky with a few minor changes to it. Of course the lyrics would have to be changed to fit into the concept of the album, but really the sound of this and the fact that, stars, space, kind of, that album was kind of, as I said in that review, had to connect to the theme of Aether. And now here with this song, it's kind of similar sounding, it has similar, some lyrical themes are similar, but, I really like the kind of more spacey sound of this song, has a longer build-up to it, and the vocals I like as well. The beginning of the track has the more, I guess you could say, rougher vocals, but then, the cleaner chorus comes in, and I think it's really catchy. It reminds me a lot of the songs from Crack the Sky, and I love that album. It's my favorite Mastodon album. If you saw the review I did of that, I just gushed all over that. So, yeah, I love this song with good reason in my opinion. And I also love the follow-up track, Octopus Has No Friends, which has a really cool guitar part in it. I just really love the guitar on this track, and that's one reason why it's one of my favorites. There are also some softer songs here, more ballad-like in a sense, not like in a traditional ballad sense, maybe more like Pendulous Skin from Blood Mountain, if you know what I'm talking about. And these tracks are more the title track, The Hunter, and The Sparrow, the closing track here. Now, I do want to mention that the album's title comes from the fact that their guitarist and vocalist, Brent Hines, his brother died in a hunting accident during the formation of this album, and so they named it The Hunter, in dedication to him. So, yeah. Another really interesting song on this album I want to talk about is Creature Lives, which is a song that has Ron Daylor, the drummer and vocalist for this group, doing complete lead vocals, really. It's the first song where he's had complete lead vocals. He only started doing the lead vocals on their previous album, Crack the Sky, and his vocal presence on this album is, more abundant in my opinion. He appears on a lot more songs, and I do like it because his vocal style fits better with the more traditional kind of heavy metal or alternative metal mix leaning sound that you hear on this album. He doesn't really do any sort of growls or anything like that that matches more with the sludge metal sound of their earlier works, but he does match with this sound well in my opinion. And Creature Lives is definitely a good example of that, I guess to say. It's also a bit more of an experimental track. You have these weird build up and these weird sounds kind of put into it at the beginning that just kind of bleed into his vocals. And I do like how the instrumentation on this track has sort of a building feel to it, and it really kind of makes you pay attention to his lyrics and his vocals. And I do really appreciate how the song is a bit differently structured from the rest of the songs on this project. It's definitely a high point in my opinion for that reason. And I do like how it builds up at the end, and you know, he's just saying the creature lives, stuff like that, and it's cool in my opinion. This track Spectralite that I talked about before that features Scott Kelly on it is definitely a more aggressive track on this project. As I said before, the only real super aggressive songs I would say are Black Tongue, Blasteroid, and then this song. And I do like how it kind of comes at the end, reminds you after Creature Lives, which is more of a, you know, toned back, not as heavy song that Mastodon can still do aggressive when they want to. So overall, The Hunter is definitely Mastodon's most peculiar album in my opinion. It's definitely weird in many regards because how they play with different, you know, styles on this album. As I said before, there's moments where they're clearly playing with, you know, the more familiar territory for them, like sludge metal and progressive metal, but then they add in some more traditional heavy metal elements, some alternative metal elements, and, you know, even some punk elements at time. I know sludge metal is kind of rooted in punk music to a degree, but, you know, as I said before on Blasteroid, you can really kind of hear those punk screams that are really kind of cool in my opinion. And I do like the vocals throughout this album overall. I like how they play with, you know, the three vocalists more in my opinion from their previous album. They have less moments of, you know, switching back and forth between the aggressive and the clean vocals, but they do focus more on the three vocalists and kind of trading off between them. You know, many songs, one of them will do verses and other will do choruses. Sometimes they'll layer their vocals together, and it sounds very nice when they do that. However, without a larger concept to this album or story running through it, I can't help but feel it falls a little flat in comparison to some of its peers in terms of the Mastodon discography. It's just not a bad album, but I feel like when you put it next to Crack the Sky or Blood Mountain or Leviathan, it just kind of pales in comparison to the grand proportions that you see on that album. And you know, kind of how this album was made, it kind of makes sense given the structure and the fact that there's no story running through it. I just feel like maybe the songs could be a bit more, you know, better at times, a bit more memorable at times to really kind of have it stand up against those albums while still having the, you know, no concept running through it. But overall, I don't think there's a song on here that I dislike. I enjoyed listening to this project all the way through, and I really don't have too many strong complaints here. It's a pretty good album in my opinion. And if you prefer the sludgier Mastodon, you know, the more aggressive Mastodon, or maybe the super progressive Mastodon, maybe this album isn't quite for you, but if you're a fan of just heavy metal music all around, different styles of heavy metal music, I'm sure there's something on The Hunter that you can enjoy. Maybe it's the more aggressive leaning tracks, or maybe it's the more, you know, traditional heavy metal leaning tracks. But regardless, I like this project, and I really don't care what anyone else says. I enjoy it. So overall, if you can't already tell, I definitely recommend this album. And yeah, thank you for watching. But wait, I'm not done with this review yet. There's one last thing I want to talk about. Well, the thing I need to talk about isn't actually related to The Hunter. It's actually an EP that Mastodon put out before The Hunter. It's the Jonah Hex Revenge Gets Ugly EP. It was a soundtrack to a film of the same name, and I haven't seen the film or know anything about the film really except for this soundtrack EP that Mastodon apparently composed the music to. And yeah, I just really want to talk about it at the end of this review because I didn't really feel like I had enough thoughts about it to put into its own video, and I did want to cover it because, you know, Mastodon Madness, I kind of got to talk about all of Mastodon stuff. So really, what do I have to say about this EP? Well, it's 6 tracks, pretty much. Really, what I mean by that is there's 4 tracks, and then 2 of them are alternate versions of 2 of those 4 tracks. And it's completely instrumentals, there's no vocals here at all. And it's definitely, some parts are sludgier, and some parts are more progressive. And at times they even do have that more traditional heavy metal sound that you do here on The Hunter. But really, it's good music in my opinion. I really don't have too much to say about it. It's, for instrumentals, they're pretty good, but I really don't feel like I can give too in-depth of a review without having actually seen the film or knowing anything else about the film. And yeah, so I really don't know what this music is like in the context of the film. Maybe it makes a lot more sense, but as I was listening to it, I was just listening to it as normal, you know, music, and I enjoyed it. It's not Mastodon's, like, you know, it's not Crack the Sky or anything, but, you know, if you're a Mastodon fan, I recommend you check it out. So now, for real, that was the end of my review for Mastodon's The Hunter, and then that EP I threw in at the end, because why not? Thank you for watching. If you're a fan of Mastodon, make sure to subscribe, as I said before. You don't want to miss out on any more of these Mastodon reviews, as well as other metal and music-related reviews on this channel. Thanks for watching. subscribe, leave a comment down below if you want, and stay golden.